since the first pioneers changed the harshest aspects of our world.
I'm going to start this video by looking at this brand new cinematic trailer. Then we'll move through and look at a quick highlight reel, showcasing some of the things that I think set this game apart from the rest. And then finally, in the body of the video, we'll take a look at some longer form gameplay. If you're wondering what you're looking at, this is Falling Frontier. And it's a strategy game, a sci-fi RTS, that's got me particularly excited. I think it's going to scratch an itch that has been waiting to be scratched for a long time, but moreover, I also think that it delivers an experience that no other strategy game, particularly sci-fi strategy games, have quite managed to deliver yet. And I think it does so, and as these trailers and gameplay demonstrates, in a way that is incredibly rich in storytelling, from its soundtrack to its visuals to the itty-gritty detail of every element that they've showed us. I think that Falling Frontier could be something rather spectacular. So, let's discuss not only what Falling Frontier is, but a little bit of my analysis about why I think it'll scratch that itch. Let's begin. At a simple level, Falling Frontier, developed by Stutterfox Studios and published by a publisher I'm particularly fond of for their wonderful strategy game work, Hooded Horse, is set in a procedurally generated star system, a new star system. And as you can see by the year up in the top left there, it's a few hundred years ahead of where we're at right now. Falling Frontier is a sci-fi real-time strategy game with a focus, and you'll notice from looking at the gameplay, from watching the different user interfaces and experiences, that this is much more focused on intelligence, on logistics, on ship design, on supply lines, on the intricate details that are making up these battles. Moreover, it's not about, say, a 20 combat strength unit on one tile moving on to another tile, but rather it builds a deep world. And you'll notice that now as we transition through into some longer form gameplay as well, so that you can get a feel for what Falling Frontier might actually look like. This is the Rising Titan campaign. The social and political settings here are somewhat familiar as well. Taken straight from the Steam description, rivals from the old colonial wars between Earth, Titan, and Venus, and the other lineages that divide humankind, have also arrived in the same star system. So we have a political backdrop of conflict and various different sort of social or economic groups. Now, in terms of the actual gameplay itself, as I mentioned before, it's set in a procedurally generated star system, a new one at that, filled with, of course, planets and moons and all of the things that you would expect. The core gameplay functions around building shipyards, upgrading supply depots, resources, refineries, reconnaissance stations. That's the world itself. And then, of course, above that, we have layers of different gameplay systems, research trees with technologies, for example, to upgrade our ships, weapons, colonization, new planets, explorative technologies, you name it. It's all there. But you can see when you look at the UI, it's set out in a way that is clean and crisp, and I think that is something I'll touch on a little bit later in the video about how Falling Frontier may be able to build a world that is incredibly complex in detail. Those little things, supply lines, ship shield hulls, and positioning in battle, where every ship and every crew member seems to matter a lot more than it would in other titles, yet it appears to be delivering it in a way that is very user-friendly. And that's incredibly important. So in Falling Frontier, there are 5 key dimensions to its gameplay, at least as far as we know so far. Firstly, combat. As I mentioned earlier, there's a much more sort of intricate level of detail and depth to combat in this game. Likewise with the ships and all of the user interfaces that you're seeing on screen. They are, I have to say, pretty impressive. We know that in this game, shots from ships can miss, hit unintended targets, ricochet off hulls, destroy nearby environmental features, or, of course, enemy ships, or friendly ships at that. We know that smaller, more maneuverable, more agile craft will behave much differently to the larger sort of destroyer-like vessels, and you'll see that play out in this footage as well. It bleeds not only a level of depth that I'm quite excited about, but also I think that it will allow for different styles of play to come through. And you'll maybe feel this a bit more as I go through. But for example, it may not always be that overwhelming combat strength wins every time. In fact, I would argue that certain combat styles, like maybe guerrilla warfare or stealth attacks, could play an ever-increasing and important role. And that allows different factions or strengths to succeed and not just be in a purely numbers-based battle. The next element that they talk about a lot is logistics, which may not sound like the sexiest of things. You probably don't wake up in the morning and think, oh boy, logistics. But I think it's quite an important part. As they say on the Steam listing, it's a wonderful quote: wars are won and lost through logistics. This, again, bleeds into that guerrilla warfare, that supply lines, refineries, resources. Not just the overwhelming power of combat strength, but how have you set up your supply chains? Where are you moving your ships? Can you use your agile mobility, yet weaker strength to your advantage in transporting not only, of course, military supremacy, but also resources? Yield, your economic activity is just as important. Next up, they talk a little bit about intelligence. The use of scouting ships to, of course, discover new things and new systems, new areas, but also probes, recon stations, allowing us to not only find new things, but also keep a watchful eye, that sort of monitoring gaze over the world as we search for potential enemies or foes. And, of course, this leads back in to that logistics system that we were talking about earlier. Then we have to think about, well, actually, what are we doing? Who are we? What do we have? And there are two elements to it. The first, and you saw a little bit of footage of this at the start in the trailer. They haven't shown us an awful lot, but we know that design in this game is incredibly detailed. If you've played a game like Stellaris, where you can change your ships a little bit, interchangeably swap the weapons, that kind of thing, you'll really likely to enjoy this. We've seen over, I think, 20 different ship types, loads of different weapons and arrays, from cruisers to battle cruisers to scouts and civilian ships. It does appear like there is a level of creation and design, of sort of modularity to ships in this game that we haven't really seen before. Level of detail is incredibly impressive. And then lastly, it's not just about the ships. You'll see just there, we clicked on a crew member. Command crews are not just sort of faceless entities in this game. They're individuals. They have ranks and identities, different strengths and weaknesses, and also abilities. And that's one that I don't know a lot about, but I'd really like to see this system play out in the same sort of level of intricate detail that the logistics system is playing out in. We know that enemy officers feature just like our own, and we know that there are some actions and interfaces with them. They can be captured, they can be interrogated, they can be left in escape pods, get this quote, as bait in order to ambush rescue ships. I think if they can bring the crew and the people element of Falling Frontier and make it just as important as the ships, it allows maybe also a level of engagement, a level of sort of feeling the game a bit more than just controlling it from this sort of abstract perspective. All in all, it comes together, I think, to create a system that is very detailed, very complex, but as I've mentioned earlier, and as I hope, pretty user-friendly. That's what we know about Falling Frontier. How does it come together, and when can I play it? Two big questions. Firstly, I think that Falling Frontier is likely to deliver a very different experience. As I've hinted at the start of the video, the level of detail and intricacy and significance of, say, a supply line or a ship or the crew on that ship takes us to a new level of detail that is often not seen in strategy games, even some of the more complex, grand strategy games. Although it's important to note that, of course, a grand strategy game may have a slightly different focus than this one. It may be more interested in those bigger, broader systems of politics and voting and galactic diplomacy, whereas here we're more in the detail, in the lived experience. I think that Falling Frontier will seek to combine that really hardcore logistical element and a really granular level of detail, yet and this is early days, granted, yet deliver an experience that should be very enjoyable. In terms of its release window, it was initially touted as, I believe, having an early access last year. Then the recent delivery dates were targeting Q2 of 2022. That's right now, and actually it's about to end. It seems unlikely then that we'll receive it in Q2, but they are still planning, at least as far as we know, to release it this year, 2022. I, for one, don't mind that at all. I have seen, unfortunately, and you may have too, many games that have released early and prematurely, and they can't really recover from that. It's very difficult, I think, once you've established yourself as a title that was maybe a little rushed or a little rough around the edges, No Man's Sky. It's very difficult to make a comeback. Now, not impossible, of course, and No Man's Sky may be an example of a game that has, to a certain extent, recovered from that. But I think that we shouldn't be too fearful of these delays. It seems to me this game is an indie game, of course. We should expect it to not have the grandiose budget that a AAA title might deliver. But I think that we should expect it to deliver an experience akin to that. Even just take a look at this footage here. You can see this destroyer or cruiser-like ship hunting down this other one here. You can see the way it's moving, navigating, when they moused over it there to change its pathways. You can see the environment around it fracturing and breaking, damaging it in the process as the enemy ship continues to bombard it. And it's this level of detail that not only has me thinking, you know what, I don't mind the wait, you do you, but also has me pretty excited overall for Falling Frontier. Thank you very much for watching today's video. I hope that you're interested in this game as well. I'll be happy to cover it on the channel, of course, when it releases. And finally, I want to say a huge thank you to all of the YouTube channel members, Twitch subscribers, donators. You are awesome. Thank you for what you do. And I will see you very soon. Take care.